Hello. Thank you for everyone coming this evening. My name is Lucas Thorpe. I'm on the board. I help organize the lecture series. Tonight we'll be featuring a discussion between photographer Michael Schmelling and gallery owner Brian Paul Clamp. They will be discussing Michael's most recent project, Atlanta, Hip Hop in the South, past projects, and the current exhibition of Atlanta at Clamp Art Gallery in Chelsea. A short question and answer period will follow the discussion. We'll also be having a book signing afterwards. Come on in. Michael Schmelling is a photographer whose work successfully crosses the boundaries of the fine art, editorial, documentary, fashion, and advertising worlds. His book projects include Shut Up, Truth, J&L Books, 2002, The Week of No Computer, published by Tiny Vices Books, 2008, The Plan, 2002, also published by J&L Books, and Atlanta, Hip Hop in the South, published by Chronicle, 2010. Schmelling was also the principal photographer of the Wilco book, Picture Box, 2004. Clients and commissions include Detail Magazine, The Fader, New York Magazine, Wired, New York Times, Penguin Books, Converse, and Sony. Michael lives and works in New York City. Brian Paul Clamp is the owner and director of Clamp Art, a gallery in Chelsea in New York City, specializing in modern and contemporary art with an emphasis on emerging and mid-career artists. Mr. Clamp opened the gallery in 2000 after completing a Master of Arts degree in Critical Studies in Modern Art at Columbia University. For 8 years prior to that, Mr. Clamp served as the director of gallery on Manhattan's Upper East Side that specialized in late 19th and early 20th century American paintings. Aside from exhibitions at his own gallery space, Clamp has curated numerous photography shows and is the author of a number of publications on American art to date. Michael Schmelling's publisher, Chronicle Books, describes Atlanta as a book that focuses on a city that has become a dominant center of hip-hop since the late 1990s. Home to mega-selling artists like Outkast, T-Pain, and T.I., and host to an electric mix of superstars, aspiring young rappers, and inspired fans. In Atlanta, photographer Michael Schmelling documents the artists, the fans, and the musical vitality of a city that is always redefining hip-hop. Featuring more than 160 photos from up-and-coming rappers to club kids to multi-platinum artists, Atlanta also includes essays on the city's hip-hop culture and interviews from key Atlanta figures like Gucci Mane, Andre 3000, Big Boy, Shawty Lo, Ludacris, and The Dream. The exhibition Atlanta Hip Hop in the South runs at Clamp Art Gallery through March 19th, and I encourage everyone to see it. I saw it this last Saturday. I really enjoyed looking at it. Please welcome Michael Schmelling and Brian Paul Clamp. Thank you.
So, as Lucas was just saying, I've spent the last 10, 12 years working on a bunch of largely self-initiated projects, and so I put together a slideshow of a bunch of basically all of my book projects in order, and Brian and I will talk about them. And I just wanted to start off with this video that's it's a video I shot in 2002 of James Holloway, who's the subject of my first book, Shut Up, Truth, that was published in 2002.
James Holloway, a Texas native, has spent most of the last 7 years living in El Paso, working as a projectionist at local theaters. All the photographs in this book were taken between 2000 and 2002, except for the one where
be, well, I say things that I shouldn't say, you know. Yeah, I mean, you know that, and, I've got, bad attitudes, just like you said, and it is true I do, and, namely it's, let me think what else. I lie sometimes, I don't always, I normally try to tell the truth, but sometimes I might not tell exactly the whole truth, occasionally, and that's not right, and stuff like that. Having, thoughts of, hatred. Sometimes I see people that I don't like, and I have, hatred, against them, anger, being angry. When I shouldn't be, but I am. So that's bad. And let me think what else. Of course, I don't drink and I don't smoke. I drink too many Cokes. I don't know if that's a sin or not.
What's
It probably is, stuff like that. I guess that's about it that I can think of. I can probably think of something else later, but, the thing is, everybody is, like it says, everybody's a sinner. Everybody's a sinner. But, you don't have to say sin 1,000 times a day, or even 5 times a day. Just once. That's all it takes is one. And you need salvation. You need salvation. And so, so I just thought maybe, you might want to see that tape, and you can tell me, tell me what you think, So I thought I'd just offer it, show it to you anyway. I bought the tape about 3 or 4 months ago. I bought the tape, and I bought it because I thought I'd show it to different people, whenever the time I had the opportunity, And so actually, I haven't shown it to anybody yet. But I thought since you're over, I might show it to you. I was thinking about I might show it to some other people also. But, since you're here, thought I might show it to you. If you don't mind watching, if you don't, if you want to, you might like it. You might like it,
I'll watch it.
Okay. And that's about all I can say. I think we should go get malt, though.
All right, let's go.
And you can cut off, and maybe I have something else to say later on. Shit. Can't get down to it. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Ha!
Oh, yeah, so that's James Holloway. And, yeah, so Shut Up Truth, this was published in 2002 by J&L Books. I guess it's a project I started in 2000, thereabouts. Yeah. Oh, yeah, could you not hear that as well? How's that? Great. Yeah, so anyway.
Yeah, so tell us about where this project was shot, how you ended up there, how you ended up meeting James.
Right. Well, after I graduated NYU, and I got this postgraduate fellowship to go make a documentary project anywhere I wanted, more or less. And I chose El Paso mostly because I'd never been there and it seemed totally off the map, and I had no idea what to expect. And I was down there, and I took a job as a PA on a Bruce Willis movie that was being shot in the desert. It's called Last Man Standing. I think it went straight to video. But James was the union projectionist that was hired to project the dailies on the set. So we became friends, and after the movie ended, he stayed in El Paso, and I just moved there. So we became friends and started hanging out. And then I guess like 3-4 years later, I started going back down to El Paso to make more work and started photographing him. And most of the photos in the book that we can look at are from 2000 to 2002. And I guess the idea was that like the 2 years before this, I'd started out working as a photojournalist. That's what I really wanted to do when I got out of school, and I got some work for the Associated Press in New York, and I was doing a lot of like local news photography, like press conferences and perp walks, and pretty much all the like basic like New York news stories. And I did it for about 1.5 years, and I got pretty burnt out, and I decided that I guess the idea was to go back down to El Paso and kind of start a new project and kind of try to like look for like a new way of shooting. And so I started hanging out with James, and I realized that like everything about him was kind of like the opposite of what I was doing with photojournalism. There's like with all the pictures I was taking for the AP, everything was like really context heavy and just like good news photography, like the story is told like within 1 or 2 photographs. And but what I loved about James is that there's like he lives in a 1-car garage. There's nothing on the walls. Like he always pretty much wears like a really like similar outfit, and he's always on this bed, and so I love the minimalism of it, and I just kind of zeroed in on that and the repetition of it, and just tried to make a record of like hanging out with him. And so some of these are outtakes from, like these 2 pictures aren't in the book, but a lot of these are. That's his door.
And he was receptive to the idea of
Yeah,
the
he loved
project?
it. I mean, he was, he'd been working in the cinema for years, so he loved the idea of like taking photos. And so we would take like small little trips, like we went down to Mexico and took photos, and yeah, I mean, there was other things I tried for the book that didn't end up in the book, like this. James got a job as a security guard, and we took a bunch of photos, and didn't really work out. Pictures of his TV, brushing his teeth. This is James's friend Mark, who also didn't end up in the book. He was in the video that you saw.
And your friendship with James continues?
Yeah, he's living in Dallas now. He's a corrections officer at a jail. But yeah, we've stayed in good touch. I mean, I see him every couple years, and yeah.
And when did the book come along? Was it while you were shooting the pictures, or
I
after
pretty
you
much like
completed
finished it, and I met Jason Fulford, who was just starting J&L Books at the time, and I showed him the work, and he really liked the idea of making a book out of it. I mean, I hadn't even really thought of it as a book. I'd put this work in my portfolio as a way to get, I mean, I don't know what kind of work I thought I was going to get, but I figured I'd get like magazine work or something. So yeah, I put this stuff in my portfolio.
And did you have a title at that time, or did the title come later when you were working on the book?
I can't remember. I mean, I know it came up at some point. Basically, the title is James Has Tourette's, and you can kind of see it a little bit in the video. Like at the end, he does that. He calls it barking. But he's got this type of Tourette's. I don't know. I guess the cliche of Tourette's is that like you yell out like profanity or things like that. But James is like the things that he yells or says are always like these weird. He was brought up in a really like fundamentalist Christian church, and and he's also really into communism, and he really likes a lot of like dogmatic philosophy, and so he's got all these like weird phrases. But "shut up, truth," like he at that time, I don't hear him say it that much anymore, but he would say it all the time, and so. But it also just had this nice, obviously with photography and documentary work, people are always talking this notion of truth, and it's a good title for a photo book as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is down in Mexico. There's a photo that's similar from the video. These are some, James sent me some photos a little while back from, I guess, kind of from that era, like between like 98 and 2001.
These are his images?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's pictures of this organ at the mall and his projection booth at the movie theater. His driveway is over here. This is like the road he lives on. Some movie theaters.
Yeah, maybe this is a good time for you to talk about the influence of like found photography on your style and.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely there. I guess I've been looking at that stuff for so long. I mean, there was a point in college when I was like really finding a lot of photographs and like digging through trash and going to flea markets and looking at a lot of like just straight like snapshot vernacular photography. And yeah, it's really informed my work in one way or another. I mean, I love the straight photograph and the photograph that's taken like without any real like pretense, and you stand there and you point the camera, and it's something that like if you're a photographer, it's really hard you can't get back to that, you can't fake it, but if somehow that can seep in, it's nice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's James with the book that was like right after it came out. So this next book is not technically my book or anything. It was a project about the band Wilco that I was brought on to. These two guys, Dan Nadell and Peter Buchanan Smith, who I'd met through a friend of a friend, I think from a commercial job. I'd shot an author photograph of Peter's girlfriend, and met him, and he was telling me about this. They were pitching this book to Wilco, and they didn't know what it was going to be, or even if it would be a book, but asked me if I wanted on board. So I said yes, and we started shooting this thing and kind of built this thing collaboratively together with the band and me and Peter and Dan.
How long did you travel around with the band?
It was so piecemeal. And well, the thing was they had just come out with a movie like the year before called "I'm Trying to Break Your Heart." It's this like, if you haven't seen it, it's kind of a bit of a personal account of like the inner workings of the band. And they were really interested in making this book, but making it with like they wanted to be the authors, but they didn't want to be like in it as much as like they didn't want it to be a bunch of photos of them. And I mean, they're not a big image-based band, and so they really wanted to make a book based around them and like make a book about making music, more or less. And so that was really the challenge, was to make this book without showing too much of them, but it led to some really interesting approaches in the way we did it. We photographed like every single instrument of theirs on white, and we did. Photographed at their loft. But I mean, the thing is, like, just because they're like a working, successful band, like we were shooting, like we would get a couple days with them here and there, and like, I mean, the whole project was probably only like, shooting time was only like a few weeks, but it was stretched over like a year and a half. So.
What years was this?
This was like 2003, 2000. I guess the book came out in 2004. So yeah, it was like somewhere maybe late 2002, like, and.
So right after Shut Up Truth.
Yeah, and actually. Peter and Dan sent Shut Up Truth to the band, and they, to sort of show them like what the, maybe, I don't know if there's that much of like an overlap in style, but just sort of give them a sense of like what I might do, and.
It's a very different approach, because you knew you were working toward a book, toward this product. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it falls somewhere between like, I mean, there was definitely parts of it where they were just like, go shoot it however you want, And but then there were other parts like this where it's like, you know, the art director has this very specific idea that you know, I was more than happy to execute, but it's like more assignment based in a way.
This isn't a cut, that wasn't a cutout, that was just against a white backdrop?
Yeah, that was just
Okay.
against a white backdrop.
'Cause-
But it does kind of look like some of the
Yeah,
later
your
stuff.
cutouts that you do all the
Yeah.
time in later
Yeah.
work, yeah.
So this is at the Auditorium Theater in Chicago. It's a photo of the auditorium. This is in their studio, backstage. I mean, we basically just photographed like everything around them. This is a picture of a globe in their loft space. This is an usher at one of the shows in the studio.
And then everything really changed with the band right after the book came out, right?
Yeah, one of the guys left, and yeah, they added like 2 new members, and I guess, I mean, at the time, I guess Jeff Tweedy was sort of in and out of rehab, and I think everything just got like, they were just much more like, I don't know, like well-oiled, like professional band at this point, but.
I know now you work with all different format cameras simultaneously. Is that the same way you worked in this period?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, except this is all film, I guess. So, I mean, like this is 6.9, this is 6.7.
Okay.
That's all 35. Yeah, so I'm kind of all over the place. And some of this overlaps a little bit with the plan project, which I show later. But this, I started that project at the same time. So there's like this really like intense interest with, you know, photographing people's things and just whatever objects were around. And these are a couple spreads from the book, so you can see how the stuff on white was used.
Were you involved in the design of this book at all?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, it was such a great creative experience and really collaborative. And there's like a signature in the back of the book, like this is part of it, where they gave me like, I don't know, like 8 or 16 pages to do whatever I wanted with. So there's like outtakes and pictures. Some of them weren't even shot for the project that I put together. And then at the end of I guess like when the book was wrapping up, they'd finished their album, A Ghost is Born, and I ended up shooting the album cover for it. It's just a really simple picture of an egg shot, like kind of white seamless with window light. But it ended up winning a Grammy Award for Best Album Packaging, which is pretty cool. But it doesn't go to the photographer, it goes to the designer. And then The Week of No Computer. This started out as an online portfolio for Tiny Vices, the website that Tim Barber runs. And he started a publishing company for a little while. And we ended up putting the portfolio into a book. But it was really, the point for me of like making this stuff or putting this work together was to make something that I felt was like something that I hadn't put much work on the internet except for stuff that was on my website. So the idea was try to put a bunch of pictures together that somehow worked like as a series for the internet. And it ended up really being about photography. And I guess I always describe it as like an oblique autobiography of my life as a photographer. So there's all sorts of references to other photographers and other photographs of mine. And like this is a scan of a magazine page of a photograph of mine that was published. And there's a bunch of handwritten notes in the book, things that I wrote down, just random thoughts on other people's photos. This was like a contact sheet of an idea for a book cover that went nowhere. It was never used for anything. So it's kind of finding like all the scraps of like other projects and things that didn't work out, or ideas that, you know, were kind of half-baked or just never did anything with.
Is the title literal in any sense?
Well, there was this week of no computer, and my computer died, and I ended up putting a lot of this work together like during that week, but yeah, I think people take it really literally. Like I
Okay.
made all this work somehow like in that period, but it's just a good title. This is a page from a Joel Meyerowitz book that I found on the street that was all water soaked. And then just other photographs. I've always had a hard time like putting bodies of work together that don't have any real like project involved. So, but this was a good way for me. I use this way of like talking about my work and about myself, like as the organizing principle, to kind of turn it into a project, even though the work's kind of all over the place.
I was thinking about that with the first project too. Like, do you see a little bit of yourself in James? Like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was living in El Paso. I knew nobody, and it was and it was really lonely. There was nothing to do down there except for taking pictures. And yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely some overlap in that kind of like. I mean, I just have a soft spot for like guys living alone, and I don't know, the lonely life. So.
The writing appears over and over in your work too.
Yeah, it
Your
kind of
handwriting.
started here, and this, I mean, all this stuff was really organic. I mean, I wrote these things down, sincerely, and not that I haven't. Like in the Atlanta book, there's some writing too, but it's more of like a list making. Like it's very literal. And here, it's just more like these ideas and these phrases or thoughts that I had and things to remember.
It's very much about photography, but it's more than photography too. There's an interesting overlap of different things going on for sure.
Yeah. And like this is I did a bunch of light meter tests for a flash, and I wrote them on a magazine page. So there's some really like literal photo stuff.
I remember when you did a book signing for this book in Tribeca, and that last one was one of the pieces that was in the show.
Oh, yeah,
It was one of
yeah.
my favorites, yeah.
It's a young Walker Evans and Hedy Slimane. They have like a really kind of similar profile, or maybe it just looks that way. This is an Arnold Odermatt photo that I folded and later scanned. There's some cut up contact sheets from a magazine assignment. I photographed this guy in L.A. He's a big studio executive, and I was sent to photograph his photo collection, a portrait of him like with his photo collection. So he had all these really amazing classic photos in his office. This is just like a bad photo shoot where you just take the same picture over and over again. And these are a couple of spreads from the book.
And what year did that book come out?
That was 2008. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's also a digital book, so it's a Google book, and there's no set number of them. And I mean, a few stores picked it up to distribute it, but it's largely just I guess you can still get it through Tim, but it's just print on demand, so there's no set number.
Okay. So the plan you were working on for a while?
I guess I started in 2003. And probably like during the Wilco book, but it was really slow going. The plan's a project about obsessive compulsive hoarding and people who don't throw anything away, and it's largely seen through the eyes of this company called Disaster Masters, which counsels hoarders and cleans up homes, and the title, The Plan, takes its name from their 800 number, which is 1-800-THE-PLAN. But it's also this great thing, like the plan is to clean up your house or do something with the things you own, or So it started out as this project that was more, I was shooting a lot of medium format work. I would go into these places with the crews and like take as many photos as I could with like a medium format, like in this case, a Mamiya 7 camera. And then things would start to get really messy, and I would end up like working for the crew and cleaning up and shooting pictures with the guy that runs the company. His name's Ron Alford, and I would shoot pictures with his digital camera and then point and shoot photos at the same time and kind of work for them. And so it was a pretty slow process. Like over the course of like 2 years, I went into probably like 14 or 15 homes. That's Ron. He runs the company, and so well with this work, I ended up having a show in Chicago, and I guess I kind of emphasized like the medium format stuff. I made like a lot of 30 by 40s, showed like 20 pictures, and that was like in 2005, and then after the show, I started going back to all the point and shoot photos I had, and it really, in a way, it just like it always made more sense for the project that there was all this stuff that I'd amassed, like making the project. I'd come back with all these like mini prints, and they just, I had this huge stack of photos. So I really like the idea of quantity and the work, and so I started putting that work together in a book form, and that was the book dummy. And so it had all this repetition, and it had all this. It was just more about like everything from the project.
Like accumulation.
Yeah.
Like these homes you're shooting.
Yeah, just conceptually, the project and the book would mirror each other. So yeah, it was like a lot of stuff like this. The apartment on the left, that person only had books in their house, more or less.
Talk a little more, just briefly, about this show in Chicago, though, because it was kind of unusual, right? The installation. Or
Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it was generally, there was probably like 20 or 25 like 30 by 40s, or maybe less than that, but different sizes. But it was mostly medium format stuff. And then there was also like a project room where I saved all the like things that were being thrown away from the apartments, and other kind of there was some handwriting fit into that as well. There's these handwritten pieces that I put together, and other like weird objects that I thought somehow fit into the project, and a bunch of different things.
But people were sort of like looking at this as like sort of like a trash installation or something, and you were thinking of it more in terms of just accumulating objects.
Yeah, I always looked at it as like a footnote, or to the project. That there's always, I feel like with most projects, there's always something. There's always like the stuff you didn't use, and always like a little bit extra, and there's always something else you could say, or another way of saying it. And so in a way, that room was like just another way of looking at the project.
It's interesting because there were posters that were produced for your current book, the Atlanta book, and then for the signed books that are in the gallery now, you ended up using the extra posters to wrap the books, and that's sort of like a similar idea, I think.
Yeah, and even the Atlanta blog that we'll look at later, like has that. It's kind of like everything else, and I think even within the Atlanta book too, there's like different ways of looking at the same thing, like in a couple different ways. I don't know, I just always like that there's like more than one way of saying something, and there's really no like definitive, at least for me, like just project-wise, there's never like any definitive end or any definitive like total product. There's always like some other thing around it.
Did you get to meet any of these hoarders, or were they usually gone from the apartment when you guys were there cleaning up?
A lot of them were gone. It can be really traumatic, and
yeah.
I mean, I've never watched that show Hoarders, but I'm sure people here have. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it can be kind of rough, and there was a couple people though that hung around, and yeah.
Is it the families like hiring them?
Oh yeah,
at this point, because I mean, the people who are hoarding probably don't want to get rid of the stuff, right?
Yeah, in most cases, it's either like an intervention or like total last ditch, like emergency case where they're going to get evicted or something, and they call. But most of the time, it was family members. And the places are pretty hazardous too, so always wearing like those masks that you saw that woman that she had on. They're really dusty, really messy. But so I put together this like 700-page book, color book, and Jason Fulford at J&L Books was really interested in publishing it, and we got some estimates back for it that were just totally unaffordable, like a 700-page photo book, at least for me and for J&L. And so we were trying to think of other ways to do it, and it kind of, I don't know, it must have, like the dummy must have sat around for like a year, and then I had this idea that we could print it on newsprint, and it might even be the best thing that ever happened to this project, because it really, I feel like the book really like, I don't know, it's just kind of the perfect vehicle for the project. So the book ended up being printed on newsprint, which, I mean, if you're ever in these hoarders' homes, there's a ton of newspapers, things are kind of crumbling and things are a little bit dirty, and the newsprint's really like a perfect material for that. And with printing it on newsprint, it was infinitely cheaper. We could put in pretty much every picture we wanted, and really emphasize the idea of repetition. And the way the book works, it's divided into 13 or 14 chapters, and each one is a different apartment.
What about the shift from color to black and white?
Yeah, I had some anxiety about it at first, but in the end, I just loved this so much that it didn't occur to me. It's almost like it's not a separate project, but it's really its own thing. And I think everybody always like talks about photo books, like there should be a real reason for a photo book. It should be its own thing. And I don't know if I totally agree with that, but like in this case, I mean, it's just really nice that this is its own thing. It's really like this whole complete thing.
So it was images from the plan that I first exhibited in a group show at Clamp
Oh,
Art.
yeah.
But I had been following your work for a few years before that, because I remember you bringing the Wilco book in, which, occurred before this.
And then this back section is kind of, again, like this idea of distilling the project, or this kind of footnote to the larger project. This back section is more or less like everything that was in that show in Chicago, and it was kind of the way that I edited the project the first time. So I put it in the back of the book as a way of looking at the project distilled down to these 30 or 40 photographs. And there's some like extra things. We stuck in there's a couple found photographs here on this page, and there's also like some not tipped in, but just stuck in little extras. There's a postcard. And then this is what the book looks like when it's been handled a bit. So another great thing about the newsprint is that it comes off on your hands, and the book itself gets really dirty. It's kind of a problem for, I guess, photo bookstores, but it's really great. And the newspaper ends up, I mean, I guess if you keep it in the sunlight, it ends up yellowing a little bit. So it's another nice, like, really like whole conceptual part of the project.
Were there unique objects or prints that you put into each book?
They weren't unique. They were just, I mean, the book's only an edition of 500, and they were each like, one of them was like a quiz that you take at a hoarding workshop, and one of them was a postcard that we had printed out of a color photograph of another photograph.
Right, because that just fell out of my book the other day.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I wasn't sure where it came from.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah, it's the back of it has a short story about a meditation that I did with a hoarding counselor, and I brought a photograph to her to get rid of, and we did this like meditation to try to let go of it.
Like your hoarding of photography?
Well,
of
it just
photographs?
happened to be a photograph. It was
Okay.
it was a photograph that actually, when I moved into the apartment I lived in El Paso, there was like a really large photograph of a family, and it's kind of like a really creepy, awkward family photo. But it was the only thing in the apartment, and I always felt weird about throwing it away. and ended up carrying it all the way back to New York. And I don't have any real problem hanging on to stuff, but for some reason there was just some weird superstitious thing, like I didn't want to get rid of it. So I brought that to her and we talked about it, and then, you know, I ended up giving it to her and she got rid of it for me. So
Were all these photographs shot on film? No, you said some were with his digital camera.
oh
and
no, those
some
all
were-
just those were all just his, yeah. These were all these were all film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would just give him his camera back and he would use it.
I'm just thinking about the great accumulation of images just in the world in general, which
Oh, yeah.
only excelled with digital photography probably just a couple of years after
Yeah, I
this
mean,
project.
I probably would have
yeah.
shot like, you know, 20 times as much. Ron's got amazing photos. I mean, the guy that runs Disaster Masters, there's some amazing, really, really crazy, like hoarder porn kind of things on his website, which is theplan.com if you want to look at it. It's really
Cool.
good site. Yeah, so that brings us to Atlanta. And yeah, this just came out in November. And it started out as a project for a series called 33 1/3, which is it's a series of books put out by Continuum Publishing, and each one is like an extended piece of music journalism about a record album. So they'll pick a specific record, like Exile on Main Street, and a music writer will write about the record. And they're always books of text, and so I pitched one to them that would be a photo book. They're like 4 by 5 inches. They're all black and white, like 80 pages. But I pitched one to them that would be about this Outkast record from 1998. And I guess the idea was to make a book about a photo album, about an album. And but I mean, there were other albums that we thought of. I was working on the pitch with a friend of mine who's a writer, and he was going to write a little bit for it. And but I felt like it really needed to be a record about a place or something kind of open-ended that we could photograph. So we picked Aquemini, and we got this small contract to do the book. And this was 2007, and I went down to Atlanta, and I think the first day I got there, I went to a video shoot for Soulja Boy, Crank That Superman. Do you remember this at all? Anybody? But I was on this video shoot, and it was amazing. It was like the whole community that was there. There was all these famous like rappers. There's all these local Atlanta people. It was such an amazing scene, and it just felt so fluid. And I just realized, like, oh man, like I'm down here like digging into the past, and there's like this really, really exciting new stuff going on. And so I decided, like, well, maybe we can look at this Outkast record by looking at what's happening now, and kind of, you know, look back by looking at this contemporary scene. And so that's what I started out doing. And I mean, I photographed a lot of the Outkast stuff, like the stuff that was directly related to the record, like their studios and places where the record was made. But I kept really going back to like all the other stuff that was going on. There was all these kids making music and posting it online, and this whole dance craze thing was going on. And I just really got into the hip hop community down there and started building this bigger project. So I ended up, like a year after that, I took all the work and I sent it to Chronicle Books, and kind of repitched the book with, you know, as like a bigger project. And then that's how this started.
And you were able to get out of the other contract?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were it's pretty easy to do, pretty hands off. But yeah, and I mean, that other book would have been fun, but this was like much more of a bigger undertaking, and so it's a lot of portraits of people in the scene, and like this is a kid that I photographed who has a home studio, strippers, different things like this, people's hands. Puppies. There's Bubba Sparks. There's a handful of famous people in the book. There's like Bubba Sparks. There's T-Pain. There's Big Boy from Outkast. Shorty Low. But really, like, it was way more interesting photographing like the people that weren't you know, famous, and the people that were just like kind of struggling, like hustling to make it.
So how often were you down there?
I did a month in 2007, and then I did a month in 2008, and then I stayed there for like 3 months in a row in 2009, and there were a couple other like smaller trips like in there.
Did you know people down there?
I had like one friend down there, and then he moved away, and then I met some other people, and yeah, I mean, I crashed on some people's couches, and somebody lent me their apartment, and yeah, I made a handful of friends, but. There's this kid who he makes beats, and he always wears this T-shirt that says, "If you need a beat, you need to call Bo." He sells his beats, and his name's Bo. And but that just kind of like underscores like that's the whole like spirit of Atlanta. Like everybody's trying to get on and like put their music out there, and it's really, I mean, that's what's really exciting about being down there. And it's really young too. Like everybody that's like really just starting out are like somewhere between like 16 and 19, and
Are people actually moving to Atlanta from New York, like to be involved in
Yeah.
the scene since it
Yeah.
shifted? Yeah.
yeah, I mean a lot of people look at it like Nashville, like, you know, this is a place to go where, you know, if you want to, you know, it's just more accessible, I think, than the New York or LA scenes. And then there's different sections throughout the book. This is like a car section, and
So you got the contract with Chronicle, and then you spent another 2 years?
no, just like another like year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which ended up being like, yeah, that like there was like a 3-month period where I lived down there, and this is a home studio more or less, where I mean a lot of the houses I went to, a lot of kids were making music, basically mounted to like a PC, and you know, they had like a couple of the like ready-made beat programs like Adobe Audition or Fruity Loops, and I mean something that's like becoming even more common. It just I mean Soulja Boy is probably the most famous person who's like posting stuff on MySpace and got famous off that, but there's a lot more of that happening now, where people are, you know, more or less existing on the internet and getting famous that way.
Is that how you found a lot of these people too?
Yeah. And a lot of it was like going to these parties that I'll show you in a bit. Like the one on the right, this guy Quint, he made this hard drive in like shop class, and that's what he like keeps all his beats on. Like the 2 jump drives, I think, are like what are powering it, or you know, where all the memory is for it.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a lot more color in this particular body of work, and a lot of things are kind of organized around color.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and it wasn't like deliberate, but I think it just came in partly in the editing of it, and just what I was gravitating towards. But yeah, a lot of yellow, a lot of black and yellow. And I think you see that in the show too. There's like tons of yellow. And blue.
So it's sort of unusual. Normally, exhibitions at the gallery, like I really take a lot of control in the editing and like the framing and presentation, and then certainly the installation. And this was an interesting experiment. I've seen a lot of Michael's shows in the past, which I admired. So I really kind of we did the edit together, but really everything else I just kind of handed over to Michael and let him do whatever he wanted, and it was kind of fun just sitting back, seeing how that unfolded.
Yeah, I hope it looks okay.
It looks great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the second year it was in Atlanta, I started going to these. I guess I call them teen parties, but there's got to be a better name for them. But that's more or less what they are. But the first couple I went to were like at roller rinks, and there was and they were like parties that were promoted more or less by teenagers or kids that were like 19 or 20, and there wasn't alcohol. It was just dancing, more or less. And I went to a couple of these, and then I met some of the promoters, and then like every week I had started getting texts that would tell me like where the next party was, or like, you know, what the next party was, and these appear in the book. But so these were, you know, you'd get one of these like every week, and then go to the clubs, and started shooting these like teen parties, and yeah, and so this forms its own section within the book too, and it's largely like digital black and white work.
So these are people dancing, not necessarily people making music.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they
this is
still
more.
didn't have any problem with you
No,
taking their picture.
no, not at all. I mean, there's always, I don't know, not at these parties so much, but it just seems there's always like a photographer is like part of the fixture of like most of the things I was at in Atlanta, so I didn't feel necessarily out of place.
I mean, most of the pictures are of black people. Were you the minority as the white guy in a lot of these atmospheres?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, just any assignment or any documentary photo work. I mean, unless it's like pictures of your family or your friends, like you're always kind of the outsider. So it doesn't feel like that different for me. And then there was a bunch of parties I went to where like kids that I'd met online that were, you know, posting music, or people that were trying to get their start would come and play these shows, and which were really cool because it's more or less like, you know, people that really haven't played shows, and they're playing shows more or less for their peers or kids their age. This was at a great club called Club Crunk, which doesn't exist anymore, but. And then I've got a short video to play like right after this photo, and I feel like the video kind of sums up like the entire experience and might be better than the whole book by itself. I mean, I think it might be better than the entire book.
Yeah, so let's look at the video and then we're going to see.
Not amazing quality, but you get the idea. I mean, it's like a pitch black room, and yeah, it's really hard to hear or see or anything. But what's also great about that too, and that kind of illustrates like that was like shot summer of like 2009, and that song was like the biggest song in the world, like in Atlanta at the time, and it took like I don't know, at least 6 months for it to like really hit up here, and maybe even longer for the guy that whose song that is, for his record to come out. And that was one of the great things about being down there, was like there was all this stuff happening down there that some of it happened down there and never made it out, and some of it does, and it's just this great like really like intensely like local like vital scene. So. There's a little bit of a tattoo section in the book. It's like tons of tattoos. This kid's 16 and he's got this crazy Gucci bag tattoo on his neck. Looks like it's like hand drawn. It's pretty great. Is awesome. So, I mean, I think maybe the Atlanta book, we were talking about this before, but there's like kind of elements from like every book in there. There's like some handwriting, like some of the still life stuff mimics some of the Wilco stuff. There's like, you know, kind of this attention to like people's things, which fits in with the plan, and so it's kind of a combination of a lot of different ideas that I've been working on for a while.
And then the limited edition version of the book.
Oh yeah, it
you
comes with like a
get,
piece
like,
of, yeah, you get a piece of handwriting.
Right, your directions to yourself on how to get to places in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And the exhibition includes some of these hand cut out collages of sets.
Yeah. So these are different, like, it could be a neighborhood or a gang or like a crew. And I think I was telling you the other day, but this like started like a long time ago. I used to like wait for prints coming out of the processor, see prints, and I'd cut up like whatever one that had come out before and it wasn't the right print. So I've always had all these pieces of photos, and I finally found a way to like work that into like the subject matter. And again, like we were talking about this way of like showing things twice or in different ways. I mean, you saw earlier there's a photo of everybody throwing their sets up, and here, you know, you see the kind of the same idea slightly differently, used slightly differently. And it was another highlight of my Atlanta trip was I got to shoot a mixtape cover. Well, I shot a couple mixtape covers while I was down there. But this group, Travis Porter, I shot this in 2009, and they just got signed to Jive like a couple months ago. But it's a really funny group. You know, this is the kind of thing like, I don't know, I love doing stuff like this when you're on a project where you just kind of like do a shoot for free or give somebody a photo for like whatever they need it for, and then I think they sent this off to a kid in Florida who designs mixtape covers for $100, and they put in the guy in Florida put all in the posters and everything else in there and the weird flares and things like that. I thought it was pretty cool. And these are some spreads from the book.
So with all of your books, you had pretty much creative control over the layout, right?
Yeah, I mean the Wilco book I didn't design, but yeah, this one I designed this with a friend of mine, this guy Rodrigo Corral, who does a lot of book design, but yeah, the layout's largely mine, and Chronicle was pretty hands off, except for the cover. They were pretty hands off.
What were you pushing for the cover?
I mean, that was the cover that was there was definitely like one of our ideas. I was pushing like handwriting and like it was just like it was a picture of that microphone with the orange foam and
Yeah.
handwriting, and it was really messy. It looked good. It looked good. That's what we were pushing. There were some other ideas too, but that's the back of the book.
And this book is the largest edition of any of the ones you've done, right?
Yeah, this is much different than like Shut Up Truth. I think it was 2,000 copies, and the plan's 500 copies. I guess the Week of No Computer, who knows? But yeah, this is like 10,000 copies, which seems kind of like way too many to me. But
Well, but
they're out there. I don't know.
They would obviously have an interest.
But it
in
keeps the
having
cost really low. The book's really cheap too, which is really great. It's $30. So that's not a sales pitch, but. And then this is again like this idea of like footnotes or all this residual material that you have from a project. I made this blog. It's more of a website. I guess there's a bit of a blog to it. This guy O'Rayan Catledge, he's really great. You should, if you don't know his work, you should check it out. He's a self-taught photographer that worked a lot in the Cabbagetown neighborhood in Atlanta. And Rusty, maybe we can look at the Lotto books, or Lucas. So just give it a second. Or not.
These are great.
Yeah, thanks. Worked really hard on them. Okay.
Oh well.
Oh, sorry. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, yeah, whatever. Outtakes, that's good. So there's like a ton of stuff that I didn't use for the book. I don't know, maybe some of it should have been in, but. Yeah, let's look at compact discs. That's not loading either. What about, let's just play a song from the mixtape. If we can. Yeah, play the last one.
J-Technique Mixtape Mastermind.
This is a really good song by that.
Who else
This
you
is on that
expect but
mixtape
me?
that I shot the cover for.
Word is this what they've been waiting on. The same thing they've been hating on. Technique's the motherfucking DJ. Travis Porter. What up, Ali? What up, Strap? What up, Quez? I'm a different
Is it the way I dress myself? Is it the way I brush my hair? Is it the way I do my dance? Is it the way I carry myself? I'm a different, I'm a different,
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, anyway, you get the idea. You can go check this out. If you need the mixtape code, I can email it to anybody. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on here. And yeah, Lucas, should I run through some of the editorial stuff? Do we have time? Or? Okay. Okay. Yeah, if we could just go back to the keynote. Right. So I just threw together a bunch of like relatively recent commercial work. This is from a campaign I did for Converse in 2009 and 2010. This is also from that project. It's a pretty cool campaign. It was all about basically people who make things. The campaign's about creativity, and Converse is a really easy shoe to photograph, and there wasn't a lot of like rigorous like client control over it. It was just more or less to photograph these kids, and all they had to be wearing Converse, and that was about it. That sort of looked like that. There's a bunch of them. There's a band called Felice Brothers. It's a story I did for Wired magazine about prisoner transport planes. A band in Macon, Georgia. It's, David Berman from the Silver Jews. Beirut. It's a story I did for Details about heavy metal in Egypt. There's a story for Wired about like algorithmic Olympics, kids who write code competitively. It's Richard Prince. James made it onto the cover of a George Saunders book. I've done a bunch of book covers over the years, and this was actually I pitched this to a book designer. I really love George Saunders' writing, and he had the worst book covers, so I pitched like a repackaging of his work, and so they turned out. This was a story about men who got conned out of money by women in prison. It's Al Goldstein. It's Andrew W.K. Eileen Quinlan is an artist. It's Rocky Erickson and Rufus Wainwright. Some commercial work I did for Illy Coffee. New Balance. Every now and then I'll do like a still life. I mean, I still kind of get work sometimes based on that Wilco album cover and like doing like a really simple still life. This is like a much cleaner version of that, but it's an album cover for Nico Muli. Of Montreal. This was for Seed magazine. Theophilus London. Oh, and then lately I've been doing a little bit of, I guess, design or illustration work. I don't know what you'd call it. It ends up being more like collage. This was an op-ed I did for the New York Times. There's another one. There's a couple book covers that my handwriting's on. And the one on the right I actually designed too. It's a poster I designed. And this was for a literary journal in London. I illustrated an issue that was about David Foster Wallace. So. And I think that's it.
Cool.
So I'd like to field any questions from the audience. We're going to have someone's going to walk around with a microphone for both Michael or Brian.
Testing. Anybody have any questions? Anybody?
Okay, so you've worked with a number of different publishers that have different approaches, J&L, Tiny Vices, and Chronicle. Can you talk a little bit about how different their approaches are, or how different it was to work with them, if you found differences?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, they're all very different. I mean, J&L is more or less just run by Jason Fulford and Leanne Chapton, and it's very like one-on-one, and the books that I did with Jason was, I I guess we'd lay them out. We'd spend like a weekend or a couple weekends just working on the layouts and the idea and the concept, and going back and forth. And yeah, it was very much like working with a friend, and like a really great experience. And I mean, the J&L business model is more like, which probably fits my sensibility more, is just like, let's make something and put it out there, and it'll find its audience, and see what happens. I mean, that's not to say we didn't have parties for it or things like that, but it's just much more of like, let's make something and put it out there, which is a pretty great philosophy. I don't know if it's like the best business model, but it's probably like, but it is really great. I mean, thinking about Shut Up Truth, like, actually a couple months ago, some woman saw the book in at a fair in the Netherlands and ended up like writing an article for it, about it for a newspaper in Amsterdam. And I feel like it's that kind of thing, like with J&L, like it's really unexpected like that. The people that end up seeing it or coming to it, and I mean, and that book really has found its own audience. So that, I guess that's one aspect of that. And then Chronicle is totally the opposite, where they have, you know, I mean, it was really, in a way, it was really hands off. They have like, I mean, my editor probably had like 40 titles he was putting out that quarter or that season, and they have like in-house publicists. They wanted to really push the book, so they hired an outside publicist as well. You know, we did a lot of radio and print, and you know, other types of like PR things. And like I was talking about that cover, it was sort of, I mean, you know, there was a lot of like decision making that went into like the saleability of like the cover, and which I think is, I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Like, I'm all for like trying to make something that fits in that format. And there was all sorts of like pricing things, like with J&L, if we really wanted to add a signature to a book, like, oh, here's 8 more photos that would really work. I mean, it was more or less, you know, one person's decision if we could okay something like that. But with Chronicle, there's a whole back section of the book that's like 16 pages of interviews, and I really wanted that to be part of the book, but that was like a 2 or 3 week like approval process of like getting the cost, just, you know, the cost approved. And I mean, that's just, you know, totally makes sense. It's probably like a really smart way to do it. But you know, there's also just a huge amount of lag time in between those decisions, and yeah, it's just a much bigger operation. And then with Tiny Vices, I mean, Tim's really hands off, and it was just kind of like, you know, send me a PDF of the book and we'll send it to Lulu, and, you know, and put it out. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
The people that you photographed for the Atlanta book have such like big personalities. How did you go about approaching them? How did you meet them to actually get close enough to be able to photograph them and to get text messages for these parties and stuff like that?
I mean, I guess each case is kind of different. A lot of them were, I mean, it's great to have this, like, the music as the reason to contact somebody, you know, like or the reason to go up to somebody. And a lot of the kids I met, I guess I wrote just based on like their music and trying to, it was really hard kind of translating the idea to a lot of people in the Atlanta book, like what this book was supposed to look like. I mean, there wasn't like, I mean, except for like Jamel Shabazz's Back in the Days, or, I mean, there's a couple other books, but it was really hard to be like, well, this is what this book's gonna look like, it's gonna be amazing, you're gonna love it. I mean, most of the time, I think when I was like pitching that to people, they were like, you know, didn't really have a sense of what it would look like. So that was kind of difficult. But I mean, Atlanta's a really friendly town, and I mean, it's really a networking town and a business town, and I think I guess like in that scenario, I really approached stuff as like offering people photographs for like the mixtape covers, or you know, whatever they wanted to use them for, or things like that really helped. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question, more or less?
Most of your pictures seem to have this hard-hitting direct flash with very little shadow and everything in focus. Can you comment on that look and why you chose it for your projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's something I've always like gravitated towards. I'm trying to think of a time when I didn't use a flash. I mean, I guess I started out doing like street photography, but and I think it's partly what Brian and I talked about, like the snapshot look, or I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just an aesthetic that I've always gravitated towards. I mean, I love having everything in focus. I think like some of that newer stuff, like the Wired magazine stuff, and a lot of the digital work too. Like you don't need as much flash, and I've sort of been like easing away from it in some ways. Yeah, I love the hardness of it, and it's just like the detail, and just really cleans everything up. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I hope so. I really miss it. I mean, I really like that town. Yeah, I mean, it's a great city, and I mean, once you're down there, like you can really tap into all that stuff that's going on. It's really hard to. I mean, you can hear the music that's like being made right now and the mixtapes that people are releasing. But like once you're down there, and like, it's so much different. And yeah, I'd like to get back.
Any more?
I wanted to ask you about what brought you to choosing, particularly with Shut Up Truth and The Plan. Like what brought you to those projects? Like was it, just like how you decided to pursue those for a long period and intimately?
I mean, I guess they're both different, but I guess with Shut Up Truth, it was really just trying to. I think I was really like just trying to work through something photographically, and just for my own sake, try to like I was talking about this idea of like being a photojournalist and getting further away from that, and like trying to find a way of photographing that I could relate to, or just that I felt was like more a part of me, and I think just really, you're doing a project, and like with James, I just really. I don't know, I just really connected to him, and I really wanted to like do this project. I mean, it's really simple, but yeah, and then once you're in, like you're hooked. And then the same with The Plan. I mean, I didn't know what those places were going to be like, but it took me a while to get access to those places. But then once I started it, I really wanted to like keep going, and yeah, and you just get into it.
Where'd you get the idea for photographing?
Oh, the hoarding stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, I was watching, I was like up in the middle of the night one night, and I was watching some news thing about a guy who had been crushed by a bunch of magazines in his home, and just visually it just sounded crazy. So I looked into that, and I found this guy, Ron Alford, and I called him. Yeah, but I feel like I've started all these projects without any kind of preconceived notion of like what they're supposed to be, and I mean, I guess the Atlanta book, there's a little bit of a notion of a book involved in like what it's supposed to look like in the end, or a really like vague idea of it. But for the most part, I mean, I don't, and I'm sure a lot of you are like this too. I mean, you don't know like what it's going to be when you start, and you just kind of keep thinking about what interests you, and like what you're after, and like make lists about the things you want to photograph, and try to hone in on those things, and follow it. And I think that's probably what I've done the most.
Any more questions?
Hey, do you shoot film only or also digital? And if so, how do you combine the two?
It's a little bit of everything these days. I feel like most jobs that I've been doing lately are all digital. And the Atlanta book, there's film, and there's a lot of the pictures in the book are scans of mini prints, of like 4x6 prints. And then there's also a lot of digital, like all the party pictures are digital. And I really haven't combined them until the Atlanta book, and I think it feels pretty good to me. But you know, I think there's a couple spreads in the book where there's like a digital picture next to a film picture, and probably I can tell or it bothers me. But I think for the most part, it's I feel like pretty comfortable about integrating the two.
Any more questions?
I just have a quick question, just about the exhibition. In the show that you have up now, you have sort of pieces that are on the floor. You use the color green a lot, I guess, for reference to the back of the film, I guess what you project on.
Oh, the green screen.
Green screen
yeah.
and stuff like that. And so, and you use various different sizes in the printing of the size of the prints. And if you could kind of just touch on that a little bit. I know you talked about that a little bit during the talk, but a little more information would be interesting.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, some of that mimics. There's a bunch of things going on in the book where I felt like it'd be really nice to make a book that didn't have like just one way of looking at this subject, and I think like the film and the digital and the collage and the scans of prints and the handwriting and I think it's all the same subject. It's all about hip hop, but there's a bunch of different ways of looking at it. And I think it's much more subtle in the show, but that was part of my thinking behind that as well. It's like you can, if we can take this thing and instead of just putting like 20 frame pictures on the wall, they're all the same size. Like let's make them different sizes and kind of design it in a way. I mean, I think that I got really into the shape of the layout on the wall and the gallery and just the overall design of it. So that was definitely partly inspired by the book, and then just partly a desire to keep things looking different from image to image, or making finding like a specific look for a specific image or a group of images.
Yeah, any more questions?
I think one or two more questions.
One of the things I like most about your work is the kind of aesthetic consistency that you have. When you were first starting to shoot editorial work, did you ever feel pressured to try and adapt your light, or think, oh, maybe I've got to use more modeled lights or something that the client might want versus harsh, flash on camera?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I still do to some degree. But yeah, definitely when I was starting out, yeah, and I think you're thrown all sorts of jobs that you don't know if you're gonna be good at, or that your work fits into. Like I used to shoot like business. I shot a lot of business guys. Like a bunch of my first jobs were for Fortune magazines, and I always thought I was did the worst jobs on those. There was something I just wasn't good about photographing those guys, and I think I was maybe trying too hard to light them a certain way, or. But I mean, on the flip side of that, I mean, I love being able to try to do something like if it's a picture of a New Balance shoe. I mean, it looks kind of slick, but it's a really low tech photo. But I mean, I still do there's a part of me that still, wants to try using other lights, or try to light things a specific way, or make something a little cleaner. I mean, I never feel like my work's clean enough. I feel like I could get more commercial work maybe if I clean stuff up a little bit more. I don't know. So there's always that sense of doubt. Anyway.
Time for more. Any more questions?
Good. I didn't want to end on the sense of doubt. So.
The Richard Maxwell poster,
Mm-hmm.
that connection with that playwright seems like a perfect fit, and I'm wondering how the two of you came across each other.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something I've had in slideshows in the past. I photographed this playwright named Richard Maxwell when I was working for the Village Voice, and I've never had any interest in theater. I mean, not that I can't. I just hadn't. When I got to New York, it's nothing I ever investigated, especially like off Broadway stuff, and the stuff Richard was doing was really experimental. But I went to photograph him for The Voice, and he was putting on this play called House, and this was probably, I don't know, 98 or 99. But somehow I immediately like related to the play. It just like spoke to me. It's really silly, but like just the staging of it and the language, and it was kind of like there was something like stiff and awkward about it that I really related to, and so after that I just kind of approached him. I told him I was like around if he ever needed a photographer to shoot his plays, and we've been working together for I don't know, like over 10 years now. I started out just shooting stills of his plays, and then 2002 I ended up doing lighting design for a play he did called Drummer Wanted, and we've worked on a couple of video projects, and actually in 2 weeks I'm going to France with him. We've been working on this, it's a theater project, but there's video involved, and so we've been doing this like video theater project, and we did it here, and we did it in Salzburg, and now we're doing it in France, and it's like one of my, I mean, I feel like it's like one of the best things I've ever gotten out of photography in general. Just like, you know, when you go to shoot something and you end up learning like about this whole other world and getting into it, and that's like probably like the best example that I have.
I think, you know, on top of that, it's so interesting to me that you have this identity also, you know, for your writing or whatever you call that, you know, as illustration, that, you know, you're an image maker, but then there's this following for that kind of mark making, and that poster that you did with him, which was all text. I mean, just all your handwriting and a whole poster of text.
Yeah.
Is kind of an unusual choice for a theater piece that's trying to sell, you know, a narrative or a story or.
Yeah, we've been really pushing this idea of like trying to make more of a graphic, you know, piece for each show that he does. So we've been working on for his next play. So hopefully, yeah, we'll be doing more of that. But I'm glad you noticed that.
Well, thank you, Brian and Michael, and thank you everyone for coming this evening. And we're going to have a book signing right afterwards that we're going to set up. So have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Should I just put the books over here or something?